Hey guys, welcome back to another video. It's Paige, and today I am going to be ranting about Zenith by Sasha Ellsberg and Lindsay Cummings, kind of like basically what every other booktuber has done. So, let's get started. This rant is going to be probably a little bit extra salty because I am very mad at Amazon. I post my reviews on Amazon, and for the most part I never have any issue with posting them. Sometimes I've gotten flagged for language, which is fine. I go and remove it. I try to remember to remove it before I post reviews. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. But I read over this review. I didn't see any offensive content in my review. If you want to check out my review, I will have a link available down below. But I didn't see any offensive content, but I keep getting flagged for offensive content. I'm calling conspiracy on it. I think Sasha is preventing my review being posted on Amazon, and I am very salty about it. I'm not serious. I kind of wish I was, but no, I am not serious. But yeah, so let's get to Zenith. So I normally, I very never tell anyone not to read a book. I think I might have told people not to read a book once, and that was The Girl Who Wouldn't Die. And that was because it was very anti-Semitic and very hurtful. It did not need to be read. It didn't even need to be published. I don't know what that company was thinking, but we are going to skip over that. It would have been an okay book, like a 3 out of 5 for me, if it was middle grade. That's one of my biggest things about this book, is that, and you know, my complaint about the publishing companies in general is that because YA is such a popular genre, that people push books to be YA that shouldn't be YA. So, for example, Rebel Belle, which I just got finished with, by Rachel Hawkins. It is a YA book, but it is written very middle grade. The language is very simplistic. There's nothing, I mean, if you took out all the gore and the sex references, it would be a middle grade novel, because nothing really extraordinary happens to set it apart from middle grade, except for the gore and the sex, and that's not what YA is. YA deals with a ton of more adult content that's not gore and sex, that middle grade just does not. So eating disorders, rape, bulimia, well, you know, some middle grades deal with bullying, but like more severe bullying, abuse, stuff like that. Some very serious topics that teens are dealing with, that teens deal with in normal everyday life. That's what a lot of YA books do hint on, and they do a really good job. Or, you know, they have the main characters, you know, they're adult, and the way that the book is wrote is adult. There are verbs that are more than 5 letters long, used to describe the characters and the scenes and stuff like that. It's raining, and our deck is getting an abnormal amount of rain on it. So I keep turning around. It sounds like someone's pouring a bucket of water out there. But yeah. But in the case of Rebel Belle, and definitely in the case of Zenith, both of these books should have been written as middle grade. They are very simplistic in language. Ideas are repeated throughout both of the books. It kind of smacks you over the head with it, like a lot of middle grade books do, to make sure that their middle grade audience kind of gets the point. You wouldn't really do that in a YA novel, because you're treating these people, these YA readers, as younger adults. And so you would expect for them to grasp and remember concepts that you introduced in the beginning and carry that throughout the book. Not have to repeat it at the beginning, repeat it in the middle, repeat it in the middle again, repeat it in the middle again, and then at the end again. That annoys the crap out of me, and that's not YA. That was one of my many complaints about this book. And the thing is that, as I said in my review, like, the only so hard to do because I really don't want to trash this book, no matter how much I hated it. Some people really liked it, and I feel bad. Not feel bad for them, but I feel bad for rating it so badly because a lot of people do look at my reviews. I mean, I'm not a big person for reviewing, but people do look at my reviews and people do trust my opinions. And so I feel kind of bad when I steer them away from a book, but that's why I try to be as fair as I can. And with this book, I really tried. I tried so damn hard. I read this during a readathon, and no, more like 8. I spent 8 hours on it when I probably should have just spent 4. It was pretty bad. The only real thing I can say that I really liked about this book is the summary. The summary, God bless the person that wrote the summary, because the summary is damn good. But you get into the book and you can obviously start seeing the problems right off the bat. For one thing, the book does a horrible job at world building. The authors introduce concepts and things into this world that are not explained, such as metaphors and, you know, products that the characters use, or planets, galaxies. There's like a whole world that these characters talk about that we are not privy to, and it's really frustrating to the reader when you don't understand or comprehend all of what the characters are talking about. It's really, really upsetting, and because as a reader, I want to know about this world and I want to know everything about it, and when I'm left out of the loop, it's very, very irritating to me. Another thing that really bugged me about this was the lack of, I guess you would say, sticking to the laws of nature, I guess you would say. Another thing that kind of deals with the world building is that besides 2 of the characters, well, you know, hardly 2 of the characters, none of the characters are very fully developed. They're presented as human-like, but I'm not really sure if they are human-like, if they possess the same qualities as I would. So, in my mind, if I'm in space and then I land on a planet, I would want to check if the air content is the same, and the air content that we breathe is very specific. So I wouldn't imagine that another planet would have that specific same of content where it doesn't affect you at all. But in this world, they just kind of come and go as they please. And I mean, this is not the only sci-fi book that does it. There are a lot, but it's very irritating when that happens, because you don't. It's just another part of world building. It brings you out of the experience because you're like, wait, so they're just fine? Like, can I just go on this planet and be fine, or is my head going to explode? Along with that, one of the characters, I can't even remember, Breck, I think, is described as having bulletproof skin, which I rant about in my review. Bulletproof is not bulletproof in that is how it is described in this book. How it's described in this book is that when bullets hit her skin, they flatten and then they fall, which wouldn't happen. That's just, no, that wouldn't happen. She could probably have used impenetrable and it would have been okay, although that's still not exactly how that would work necessarily. But bulletproof, even vests, even manholes, what happens is when a bullet hits something, the energy, like someone shot me in the heart, the energy from where that bullet hits, if it hits my skin, my bulletproof vest, whatever, the energy is going to travel throughout. Well, it's going to actually, if I'm not wearing a vest, it's going to travel inward. But with the vest, it's going to dissipate the energy out, so that way it lessens the impact, and hopefully by the time it reaches my skin, it doesn't break it that badly. But that's not what happened to that character, obviously. And then there's another character who has light, bright skin. The thing about having different alien species is that they were little my husband can explain this better than me. I didn't do that well in science. I got a B, which, you know, doesn't sound that well to you, but I mean, I kind of breezed through it. I kind of, you know, just, I did the bare minimum. But the thing about that is that when you're on different worlds, organisms develop differently in order to adapt to their environment. So let's take giraffes, for example. Giraffes have extremely long necks. So it's been hypothesized that giraffes before they had long necks started out as like a normal height species that would eat from, that could, you know, maybe reach like a bush, maybe a low tree limb. But as time goes on, there's more competition for those lower tree limbs and those bushes, and so there's less food. So the giraffe grew over time, it bred out the shorter neck giraffes and in favor of the mutated longer neck giraffes. So that way, and it continues and continues. So that way, the later species that we know today have really tall necks, and they can reach the vegetation that smaller animals cannot, which keeps the longer neck giraffes alive. That's a very simplistic explanation of how evolution works, for example. I mean, and scientists have hypothesized that evolution will work the same way on different planets. If you have, let's say, an all-water planet, you're probably going to have beings that have gills and swim and have webbed feet and webbed fingers and stuff like that that would help them survive in that type of environment. But the thing about, I think her name's Lyra? I don't know. This book, I absorbed nothing from this book. But the thing about Lyra's skin is that she's light bright, basically, so her emotions are reflected through her skin. And from a scientific standpoint, I really don't see a reason as to why an organism would develop something like that. That seems that would kill that mutation. Let's describe this mutation from like the original, like if she had an ancestor that didn't have that type of skin. To me, that would kill that mutation off, because they would be easily spotted in the wild. While, you know, nature would would help the non-light bright skin aliens survive, because they can hide better than the. And then lastly, I went over a lot of things in my book review on this, so you can read it to get a more comprehensive understanding of why I really hated this book. But one of the other things in this book that really irritated me was that the overall plot was very confusing. There were multiple POV switches. There was an unsteady pace. The POV actually in one chapter, and the chapters, I'll show you right here. The chapters are labeled, so that way you can tell whose point of view this is from. In one chapter particularly, the POV actually switched. So the POV was set at the beginning chapter to be from Dex. Halfway through, it switched to Andy, and then back to Dex. And that switching was very confusing and very irritating for me as a reader, because I didn't know what was going on. It seemed to me like that could have been a really simple fix in editing, if that was caught. But it seemed like a lot of things got past editing. Like, very simple words were repeated. Stuff didn't make sense. The prologue, not the first chapter, but the prologue opening with a location and not a name, which makes, it's inconsistent. This book is just inconsistent with itself, and then you can really tell that there were two authors writing it. Lindsay's chapters were actually better, but Sasha's, I guess because she's a beginning author, were pretty bad. You could tell because there were little sentences like, "Oh geez, what do we do? I don't know." Stuff like that. It was how I'm gonna repeat this. It's gonna be repetitive, like the freaking novel. But it was how a middle grader or an early children's book, there we go, or an early children's book would sound. And I've read them, I've reviewed them, and for their age genre, they're good. For this, it's horrible. This is not a YA novel. This, if you took out all the gore and all the sex references, and there are a ton of sex references in here, about every other chapter, there's a sex reference. I mean, it's not just, you know, I don't care if there's sex in a YA novel, but I want it to make sense for the novel. I don't want it to just be mentioned in it for no reason. I don't want the main character remembering her passionate time with her ex-boyfriend while she's hating him, because that's really unrealistic. When I think of my ex-boyfriends, I don't think of anything passionate with them. I think of how much I want to stab their eyeballs out. And then, you know, some chapters were given a year, other chapters were not. I don't know which year we're in. I don't know the whole backstory. I'm getting backstory along with my main story, but the backstory is kind of its own story because it really doesn't directly relate to this story, and it's all very confusing. I mean, it was a great premise, but the follow-through was god-awful. And, you know, overall, the writing in this book, with I guess the exception of some of Lindsay's chapters, but the writing in this book was really lazy. It's almost like someone waited until maybe like a week or even a few days before their deadline and then started writing it. That's how this book felt. Now, besides what's in this book, I do have a lot of other issues with the authors and the cover specifically. As you can see on this cover, where is it? #1 New York Times best-selling authors. Now, I did try to look for Lindsay. I didn't really see her. Maybe she was on a New York Times best-selling list before. I don't know. But Sasha, being a new author, is not a New York Times best-selling author. I only found this book to be #1 on young adult ebooks on July 10th, 2016. So that was before this book got picked up for publication, and that was actually not even the full book. That was a kind of like a teaser. I think it only had maybe 2 or 3 chapters, but yeah, that shouldn't qualify her to be a New York Times best-selling author. I hate when publishing companies do this. It's very deceiving because people do buy books based on if it's a New York Times bestselling, if it has that tagline. And so publishing companies use that to their advantage. So they exploit any loophole that they can. But I will tell you one thing. This was not New York Times. When it came out, it was not #1 New York Times best-selling book. It got up to #7, but it never toppled The Hate U Give. And I believe The Hate U Give is still, if it's not #1, then it's like pretty up there still. Zenith never touched it. And the last thing I want to address is a couple of months ago, I was on Instagram and I used to follow Sasha. I was looking through her stories and she was on there talking about her newest book that is coming out, which is still titled Project Red. Basically, it is this is speculation, a Scottish fantasy book, and it's kind of sounding like time travel, and you know, Scottish because she's obsessed with Scotland. So I am kind of thinking that this is an Outlander book. Outlander-esque book. But yeah, anyways, so she was talking about Project Red, and she told her audience, which is a ton of her audience is composed of very young children. She told them that to ensure, and this is, you know, the approximate language that she used, this is not word for word, but approximately what she told her young audience is to help her get Project Red picked up by a publishing company, make sure that so she said make sure you go to Goodreads and leave a good review for Zenith, because that will help her get Project Red picked up by a publishing company. That's very exploitive to her young audience members that don't know that you can't do that. You can't do fake reviews. It's not that it's illegal or anything, but it's very dishonest. And for her to use her fan base to ask for that request is horrible. It's very exploitive. It's very dishonest, and it makes me not want to ever read anything else by her if she's going to be like that. You might notice a bit of a change in scenery. I think it's all Sasha's fault. She heard me complaining about her and she turned off my batteries. So anyways, I don't remember where I was at. I've not checked the last video file to look where I was at. I'm going to wing this. The fact that they have, well, you know, Lindsay not so much. The fact that Sasha went on Instagram and what she said approximately was for her fans, which a lot of her fan base is a lot of younger kids, to go and give good reviews on this book so that way Project Red can be picked up for publication. That's very dishonest. That's very disingenuous. That is unbelievably, I don't know, rude, mean, sneaky, underhanded, conniving, all those words, plus more that I can't think of off the top of my head. That's just, it's very sneaky of her to ask for good reviews on this so her other book can be picked up, because there's been a lot of backlash from this book, and I'm figuring that's why it's kind of getting a little hard from what I can surmise, from what I see from her Instagram stories and her Twitter posts. It might be getting a little bit hard for her to get her next book picked up. This book also says, oh, there it is, that it is the, oh, this is another thing about it. It says the Androma saga. She said that this, and this is the main character, one of the main characters' names, Androma. Would it have been that hard to add an E and D, like right at the end here, to make it Andromeda? Because that's that's a much easier word to say. And Androma? Like, what the heck? Just make it Andromeda. I know that she said that her that the character's name was inspired by the word Andromeda. Why not make the freaking word just Andromeda then? It's so dumb. I don't even know if she knows, because I know I have heard it before said as the Andromeda Saga, and I don't know if that was from her mouth or not, because if it was, that would be really, really sad. I know that she has a learning disability, and I'm not making light of her learning disabilities, because regardless whether the book sucks or not, it's a really huge accomplishment that she managed to write a book with that disability. But there were a lot of flaws in here, and it's not all her fault. It's not all Lindsay's fault. It's three-part. It's their fault, and it's the editor's fault. There was a lot of stuff in here that an editor could have caught and asked to be edited or removed, or sorry, the camera keeps moving because the cat keeps hitting it, or you know, fixed. That wasn't. And I have heard some not so good things from this publishing company, which is Harlequin Press. But you know, that's just from what I've heard, so I'm not going to say anything about it. So yeah, those are my thoughts. They might be overlapping from what I got from yesterday's video, and yes, I'm in the same shirt. This is my pajama shirt. So sorry. But yeah, I don't know where I left off. I'm way too lazy to go look at it right now. I'm probably going to edit this in a second and piece it all together. So you might have a pretty long video. So sorry about that. Those are my thoughts on Zenith. I would not recommend buying this. If you can find a cheap ebook version, if you're really interested, I'd buy that. If you're really interested in reading it, I would not buy the book. I am very sad that I actually did, and I spent over $20 getting this signed and personalized, because it just feels like it's money wasted now. So yeah, those are my thoughts. So see you next time. Bye.